Have you ever wondered, behind the dazzling spotlights and million-dollar hits, are secrets that have never been told? In the music world, where image is meticulously crafted, some artists have lived two lives, one for the public and one hidden behind closed doors. For fame, social pressure, or the fear of losing everything. Many famous musicians and singers have concealed their same-sex relationships for years, even their entire lives. Today, we'll explore some of the most surprising stories, secret relationships, buried truths, and why they couldn't be themselves. Are you ready? Because some of the names on this list might be unbelievable. Before we begin, if you enjoy these kinds of mysterious behind-the-scenes stories, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. Elton John's journey to self-discovery isn't simply a story of finding oneself, but rather a prolonged struggle between the spotlight and the unspoken truth. Before becoming a legend, Elton believed he could live up to others' expectations. He was engaged to Linda Woodrow, a relationship that seemed destined for a happy, stable life, but ultimately ended just before the wedding. Later, that very moment of separation became the inspiration for "Someone Saved My Life Tonight," a self-sacrificing act to escape a life that wasn't his own. As his career took off, he entered into same-sex relationships in silence, including with John Reid, his lover and professional partner. But in that era, love and truth couldn't always be in the same light. Then, at another stage, Elton chose a path that surprised many, marrying Renata Blowell. But even while projecting a perfect image, he was still engaged in a long-running battle with his true self. It wasn't until later, when he could no longer hide it, that he admitted he had lived too long in denial. And from that moment, a different Elton John emerged, no longer playing a role, no longer hiding. What makes his story special isn't the shocking plot twists, but the fact that a man had to go through so many different layers just to finally be allowed to be himself. And perhaps the biggest question isn't, why did it take so long? But what if he had been able to live authentically from the beginning? If there's one artist whose true self behind the spotlight took the world years to fully understand, it's Freddie Mercury, the legendary vocalist of Queen. On stage, Freddie was a storm, confident, explosive, and almost limitless. He transformed each performance into a historical event where tens of thousands of people joined in with irreplaceable energy. But when the lights went out, Freddie retreated to a completely different world, where fame couldn't hide his very private moments of quiet reflection. For years, his emotional life remained private amidst societal prejudices. He had deep relationships with both men and women, but rarely spoke openly about them publicly. Not because they weren't genuine, but because the times weren't ready. The irony is, the more global an icon Freddie Mercury became, the more layers of his self he had to live, between his true self, his public image, and the unnameable. Even in the face of illness and decline, he continued to dedicate himself to music until his final days, as if the stage were the only place where he could be truly himself. And perhaps, Freddie Mercury was not just a rock legend, but also a symbol of living authentically in a world that once didn't easily accept differences. When you mention Boy George, people immediately think of a rebellious icon of the 80s, his gender-neutral style, unmistakable voice, and the hit songs that made him famous with Culture Club. But behind that glamour lies a love story that was once kept secret. Few know that, during the peak of his career, Boy George had a deep relationship with the band's drummer, John Moss. The remarkable thing is, at the time, this relationship couldn't be made public. Due to pressure from the music industry, social prejudices of the 80s, and image-building strategies, this love story had to remain silent. Even when genuine emotions permeated their songs, the public remained unaware. It wasn't until many years later, when the truth gradually came to light, that people realized, behind those famous hits, there might have been very real, very personal emotions that Boy George couldn't put into words at the time. A secret love, or the inspiration for an entire musical era. While many artists have to hide their true selves, Andy Bell chose a completely different path. As the lead singer of Erasure, Andy Bell entered the spotlight in the 1980s, a time when coming out could ruin a career. But he didn't hide. From the beginning, Andy Bell lived very openly about being gay, a bold move at the time. And it is this honesty that makes his story special in a different way. There were no relationships to hide, but that doesn't mean his path was easy. Behind the glamour were pressures, discrimination, and worries about whether audiences would accept him for who he truly was. Yet, Andy Bell persevered, and together with Erasure, created resounding hits, proving that sometimes the most shocking thing is honesty. When you think of Pete Townshend, you immediately think of a rock legend, the man behind the Who's timeless hits. But there's an aspect of his life that has surprised the public. For years, Pete Townshend's image was associated with his standard rock star, family, career, fame. However, he once admitted to having experiences and curiosities related to both sexes. Not public relationships, but very private, difficult to discuss aspects, especially in a time when the concept of sexual orientation was still heavily prejudiced. These revelations sparked much debate. Were they simply personal discoveries, or a part of himself that he had to keep secret for so many years? Whatever the answer may be, Pete Townshend's story illustrates one thing. Even the biggest rock icons have secrets that the public only learns about long afterward. For Michael Stipe, the lead singer of REM, the mystery lies not only in his music, but also in his private life. Throughout his career, Michael Stipe almost never explicitly stated his sexual orientation. His interviews were always vague, his answers half-hearted, enough to pique public curiosity, but never a clear confirmation. This led to countless speculations. Was he hiding something? Or simply wanting to maintain some privacy amidst the spotlight? Only later, after his peak, did Michael Stipe gradually become more open about himself, admitting that he had relationships with both men and women in the past. It wasn't a dramatic secret revealed, but a very personal, very slow journey, where an artist chooses the right time to tell the truth. And perhaps it is precisely this prolonged silence that makes Michael Stipe's story so captivating in its own unique way. In a music world teeming with rebellious stars, Klaus Nomi is perhaps one of the strangest and most unforgettable names. With his alien-like style, unique anti-tenor voice, and image that almost defies all norms, he not only impresses, but also baffles audiences. But behind that eccentric exterior lies a life full of untold stories. At a time when the LGBTQ+ community still faced considerable stigma, Klaus Nomi lived a relatively private life. However, those close to him and the art world understood that he was part of this community, though he never made it public in the way we are familiar with today. Not sensational, secret relationships, but a quiet existence where the real person and art are one, yet with moments of silence that the public never sees. Klaus Nomi's life became even more haunting when he was one of the first known artists to die from AIDS in the early 1980s. A time when the disease was still misunderstood and heavily stigmatized. And perhaps that is why his image is not just that of an eccentric artist, but also a symbol of an era where so many stories were never fully told. When mentioning Marc Almond, one cannot forget his emotionally charged voice and the dark, haunting hits of Soft Cell. But behind those haunting melodies lies a far more complex inner world. Throughout his career, Marc Almond has never completely confined himself to any particular mold. While he doesn't always openly reveal details of his love life, his relationships, emotions, and personal experiences, especially with men, have clearly permeated his music. These aren't stories that are exposed, but rather things hidden within his lyrics, in his expression, and in the very image he cultivates as an artist. In a time when society still held many prejudices, expressing such different emotions sometimes meant keeping a part of his true self to himself. And perhaps that's what makes it special. Marc Almond's music isn't just entertainment, it's also a way for him to express things that, in real life, he can't always put into words. Before coming out publicly became commonplace, there was one man who dared to step into the spotlight early on, Jobriath. In the 1970s, when the music industry was still full of barriers, Jobriath was promoted as the first openly gay rock star. A bold image, even shocking at the time. But behind that glamorous campaign lay a much more complex story. Coming out didn't come with widespread acceptance. Instead of being celebrated, Jobriath faced public backlash, media pressure, and an industry not ready for change. It wasn't the relationships he kept secret, but the opposite. The lack of concealment became a burden. His career quickly faded, despite his undeniable talent. And then, like many other artists on this list, Jobriath's life ended quietly when he died of AIDS in 1983. A man ahead of his time, yet not accepted by his time. If there was one person who truly broke all boundaries of gender and image in music, it was Sylvester, dubbed the Queen of Disco. During the glorious disco era of the 1970s, when most artists were still reserved about their personal image, Sylvester emerged like a storm, flamboyant costumes, genderless style, and an enchanting falsetto voice. He didn't hide his true self, but that doesn't mean there weren't hidden aspects. Behind the spotlight, Sylvester lived in a world where being himself meant facing stigma, misunderstanding, and sometimes loneliness. His relationships and personal feelings weren't always understood or accepted by the public, even though he never tried to conceal himself. Sylvester's music, especially his classic disco hits, was not just for dancing, but a declaration of freedom, identity, and the courage to live authentically in an era unprepared. And when he died of AIDS in 1988, the world gradually realized they had lost not just an artist, but a pioneering icon. Luther Vandross is remembered as one of the greatest R&B voices of all time, sweet, soulful love songs that touched the hearts of millions. But one thing the public has always wondered about throughout his career is, who did the man behind those love songs truly love? Unlike many other artists, Luther Vandross almost never publicly revealed his love life. There were no confirmed relationships, no clear answers, just a silence that lasted for decades. This secrecy fueled countless speculations. Many believe he had private relationships with men that were never made public, perhaps due to pressure from the industry, his public image, or his own personal choices. What makes this story so special is that, though unspoken, the emotions in his music are incredibly genuine, as if everything was conveyed through each melody rather than words. And perhaps that very silence is the greatest secret in Luther Vandross's life. Johnny Mathis once said, "I believe that we can be more sensitive to the needs of our fellow human beings, that we can be better neighbors to each other." But who could have guessed that just one sentence would almost ruin his entire career? In 1982, in an interview, Mathis calmly shared that homosexuality is a lifestyle that I have become accustomed to. But when this statement was made public, things quickly turned into a storm. Death threats kept coming, forcing him to choose silence for decades. Mathis avoided the subject throughout his career, only speaking out in 2017. "I'm from San Francisco, but even there, being gay is not normal." His journey from an accidental public outing to a gradual acceptance of who he is reflects the pressures many LGBTQ+ artists face in their time. Imagine having to hide yourself just to continue singing love songs. Mathis persevered, but his story makes us wonder, how many other artists live in fear? How many talented singers never get the chance to speak for themselves? If anyone was ever called the fifth member of the Beatles, it was Billy Preston, a rare keyboard prodigy who performed alongside the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and many other legends. He performed on the world's biggest stages, but his life was far from glamorous. In a time of strong prejudice, Preston kept his personal life private, and later, close associates confirmed he had relationships with men, something he never publicly acknowledged during his lifetime. Alongside this were silent battles, the pressures of his profession, periods of drug addiction, and the lingering trauma behind the spotlight. The irony is that the artist who contributed to music history repeatedly retreated into the shadows of his own making. And the question remains, if Billy Preston had lived more authentically, would his life and career have been even more brilliant? If there's one thing the world has never truly understood about Janis Joplin, it's not just her fiery voice, but also the quiet love affairs hidden behind the glamour. Janis is often remembered as a fierce rock icon for her intense relationships with men and for the image of a woman living without limits. But few know that she also had genuine feelings for women, in her own unique, very human way. In 1963, amidst the freedom and prejudice of San Francisco, Janis fell in love with Jay Whittaker, an African-American woman. But in the social context of the time, that relationship was quickly stifled by external barriers and pressure. Later, she entered into a deep and tumultuous relationship with Peggy Caserta, the owner of a fashion boutique. It wasn't just love, but a storm of emotions, passionate, hurtful, and inseparable. On stage, Janis Joplin was a living fire, fierce, wild, and uncontrollable. But when the lights went out, she returned to a long-lasting solitude, a void that no fame could ever fill. Her words still haunt people. I've had sex with 25,000 people, but I still have to go home alone. And perhaps the biggest question remains. If Janis Joplin had been born in a more open era, would her life story and music have taken on a different tone? If Dusty Springfield's voice could touch millions of hearts, her love life unfolded in a quieter space, where true emotions had to hide from the prejudices of the era. In 1970, in a rare moment of frankness, Dusty once said, "I know I can be attracted to a girl as well as a boy." A bold admission at a time when differences were still difficult to accept. Even so, she chose to keep her private life in the shadows. Her relationships with women, like Faye Harris or actress Jobriath, were known only through quiet, unassuming stories, never publicized, and never becoming the focus of media attention. Behind the glamour of a pop legend, Dusty Springfield faced very human struggles, loneliness, depression, and periods of addiction, pain perhaps deepened by the suppression of her own emotions. And yet, amidst all of that, her music lives on. From Son of a Preacher Man to other timeless love songs, Dusty didn't just sing about love, she lived it, though not always authentically. Her legacy, therefore, lies not only in her voice, but also in the emotions never fully expressed in words. Little Richard's story is not just musical history, but a pioneering tragedy, where talent, identity, and belief constantly clash. With hits like Tutti Frutti, he not only created a new style, but also laid the foundation for the rock and roll era. But behind that explosion of success was a man constantly torn between two worlds, the dazzling spotlight and the unseen inner turmoil. In 1995, Little Richard publicly admitted, "I've been gay my whole life." A seemingly liberating moment, but one that didn't close the door on his inner conflict. Because later, under the influence of his religious faith, he made statements denying his own identity, calling it unnatural. This shift made his image even more complex. As if he himself were battling his own self, he once spoke of feeling isolated, too different, too rebellious, and too not fully accepted in any world. Despite being a pioneer of rock and roll, Little Richard still carried within him a nagging question. Had he been properly recognized for what he created, or had his personal identity come at too high a price? And that question, to this day, remains without a truly complete answer. If there was one artist who transformed transformation into art, it was David Bowie, who not only changed music, but also the way the world viewed human identity. From Ziggy Stardust to his later, more experimental phases, Bowie always appeared as a futuristic figure, breaking boundaries of gender, image, and even the definition of what it means to be an artist. But behind those bold stage personas, his personal life was also a subject of public curiosity. Bowie had relationships with both men and women, and at various times, he didn't shy away from admitting to being attracted to multiple genders, though his self-definition also changed over time and with life experiences. What's remarkable is, Bowie never made it a sensational secret. Instead, he let it exist as a natural part of his being, flexible, transformative, and unconventional. And perhaps it was that very freedom that helped him create timeless works, where music was not just sound, but also a space for people to become whoever they wanted to be. David Bowie was more than just a rock star. He was proof that identity is not a fixed box, but a journey of constant change. After all the spotlight, fame, and untold stories, what remains is not a secret, but the real people behind the music. If you find these behind-the-scenes stories interesting, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. And don't forget to leave a comment. Which artist impressed you the most? I'd love to read your opinion.